Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, December 22nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Cotton Bowl game against Missouri is in 7 days, 1 week from today. That doesn't seem possible. The game against Michigan in 344 days. Before we get into the meat of today's show, did want to kind of just give you a little update on something that we talked about on yesterday's show, which was Jeremiah Smith, the number one player overall in the class of 2024. His letter of intent was not in at the time we recorded. His letter of intent was not in for a number of hours after that. Feelings were had, posts were made on many a message board, and then Jeremiah Smith did in fact send in his letter of intent. So Ohio State does in fact have the number one player for the class of 2024, five-star prospects. All the stuff that we had sort of projected on yesterday's show has in fact come to fruition. So, okay, that's all done. Now, on to the topic of today's show. This is something else that happened on Wednesday that kind of slid under the radar in a way that it probably would not have on most other days. The NCAA issued its notice of allegations to the University of Michigan football program for alleged level 2 violations that eventually led to a level 1 allegation, level 1 being the most serious. We're going to get into what all this means, what it doesn't mean, when things might happen, because this is obviously a story that we've been covering quite a bit over the last year. Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com joins me. Tony, I guess let's start with what this is not. None of this has to do at all with the Conor Stalions thing, any fallout from the Conor Stalions thing, any related things with, elements to the Conor Stalions story. This is all related to stuff that happened a little while ago. This is the stuff you've sort of seen shorthanded as buying a recruit a hamburger, which is, sort of adjacent to the truth, but really doesn't tell the whole story.
Well, and yes, the NCAA is certainly going to really get involved with something as simple as buying a hamburger for a recruit. Now, this is something that has been going on since the COVID times and is not the story that has been occupying a bunch of people's lives with the Conor Stalions thing. So that will eventually get settled, and they're trying to speed it along to make sure that it doesn't take maybe as long as this one has. But yeah, when the news came out on Wednesday, it was like, well, which one is it? And of course, it is the one that is still first in line. There's a little bit of a backup with all of Michigan's NCAA infractions, so this is still the first one.
Yes, the which major NCAA infraction case are we talking about here is never a phrase you want to be asking about your program, but that's where Michigan is right now. So let's just kind of touch on, first of all, what we're talking about here. Level 2 violations, level 1 violations. I'm guessing people don't really, off the top of their heads, know the difference. So you sort of lay out what we're talking about here in terms of level 2 violations, what they're being accused of, and then what the difference between that and a level 1 violation is.
Yeah, the level 2 is misdemeanor stuff as opposed to level 1 felony type things. Incidental things, stuff that can be kind of like washed away with a class or a book report type of punishment, those sorts of things. And the level 1 comes from, that's a little bit more serious. And the level 1 that comes from this is allegedly Jim Harbaugh lying and misleading investigators regarding some of those level 2 violations. And generally the level 2 violations aren't things you need to lie about. But the NCAA believes they've been lied to regarding these violations in terms of watching workouts via Zoom, which was a no-no back during the COVID restrictions, visiting with recruits in person during COVID was a no-no, and that there's some allegations there as well. So things like that were those are the level 2 violations, and then the allegations are that Jim Harbaugh lied about those violations, which have led to a level 1 allegation there, which is a more serious charge and which brings with it suspensions, and which is also something that Jim Harbaugh is well aware of now.
Yeah, and a level 1 violation can lead to a suspension of up to 6 games. This is the case that Michigan self-imposed a 3-game suspension for Harbaugh at the beginning of the season. So Harbaugh has already served 3 games. They could potentially tack on up to an additional 3 games for that level 1 violation. The NCAA could. whenever that happens, we'll get to the timetable on that in a little bit. One thing that is a little bit ironic, there's a little bit of an ironic subtext to all of this. If you remember the Hang 100 comment from Ryan Day during COVID, the origin of that was an allegation that Ohio State, from Michigan, an allegation that Ohio State had been violating COVID rules based on a video or photo of something, and like a coach was in a spot where Jim Harbaugh didn't feel that he should be during the whole thing. So a little ironic that Michigan is caught up in all of this now. And the NCAA has, sort of taken exception to the idea that this is just about buying a recruit a hamburger, which is sort of the story that's getting spun out of a lot of places. This is back in August. The NCAA issued a statement sort of explaining that no, this was not about hamburgers. The quote was, quote, the Michigan infraction case is related to impermissible and on and off campus recruiting during the COVID-19 dead period and impermissible coaching activities, not a cheeseburger. That was from Derek Crawford, the NCAA vice president of hearing operations. So, the NCAA is sort of aware that this is getting, they're sort of getting treated like they're idiots for making this about a hamburger and saying like, no, this is not in fact about a hamburger. Even if it was on a Friday, even if it was during Lent, no, that is not what you're being punished for or being investigated for. It's for a bunch of other stuff. So the timetable on all of this, we're looking back at the COVID dead period. The COVID dead period has been gone for a couple of years now. That ended, I believe, in middle of 2021, give or take. I mean, it has been quite a while. So what's the timetable on all of this in terms of, the investigation itself has dragged on and has been extended a couple times for various reasons. Moving forward, what's the timetable on this? When can we expect Michigan to answer, the NCAA to answer, hearings, decisions, all that kind of stuff? What is the timetable we're looking at right now?
Yeah, so once Michigan received their notice of allegations, they then have 90 days to respond. Now, could they do it before then? Sure. Will they? They don't seem to have be the kind that is trying to run through these allegations and get things settled as quickly as possible. So they'll have 90 days to respond. Then the NCAA has 60 days to respond there. So you're looking at a 5-month time frame from now before the NCAA responds. And then there's a hearing and the Committee on Infractions. So we're talking, 6, 7, 8 months before any kind of anything is handed down. And then there is some time before that maybe even be released. And then that can be appealed, which could drag this out another 6 months. So, I mean, it could be, we could be talking 14 months from now. We could be talking, 7 months from now as to when we'll know exactly what Michigan is doing or having what their sanctions will be, who, what head coach will be punished at that point. Who knows?
And one thing that I think had people really annoyed when this came out on Wednesday, it was reported by Angelique Chingelis of the Detroit News. And people were very annoyed that this came out on early signing day. Now, this came out in the afternoon on early signing day after the Michigan class was already, the hay was largely in the barn with the Michigan class at that point. And I think, it was interesting that it later came out that the NCAA had given this to Michigan a couple days earlier. They got it on Monday, and then it didn't come out until after the class was largely or pretty much entirely signed on Wednesday. So, in a way, I think the timing, first of all, want to do some Kremlinology on who's likely leaking the report to a local Michigan reporter versus, who the NCAA would be leaking it to, Tony? Would you like to do that bit of Kremlinology just to sort of explain how these things work?
Well, I'm like the NCAA. I am also extremely online, and I read a lot of Michigan boards. So I believe it was Ryan Day who alerted the Michigan beat reporter about the notice of allegations. Tom, is that correct? Am I right in that assumption?
Well, I've seen a lot of speculation about Ryan Day and his relatives and what have you. So certainly, one of them almost undoubtedly involved. Yeah, no, it's here's how this works. If it gets leaked to a Michigan beat reporter, it's not coming from the NCAA. It's not coming from Ryan Day. It's not coming from, I don't know, the Neutron Man. Like it's coming from someone within the Michigan program, almost certainly. The fact that it was timed to come out on the afternoon after everyone was signed, the hay is in the barn at that point, as I said, so then it is less likely to do any sort of damage. And the timetable we're talking about, who knows? This is not the big one. This is not the one that's the potential, atom bomb here in terms of a case. What it could open Michigan up to is you get into lack of institutional control things. You've got multiple major infractions cases going on at the same time, and the notice of allegations on the Conor Stalions stuff is not out yet. But when it does, then they will have multiple, assuming that there is a case made and a major infractions case made out of it, and it certainly seems like things are trending that way. Then you will have multiple, major infractions case going at the same time. And if this one isn't going to be done until potentially with appeals until at least late next football season or even the one after that, and then the other one is going to be coming out at some point, and whether that's 2 months from now or 6 months from now or a year from now, that's going to be hanging over Michigan's heads as well for a while. So, I don't think you're necessarily going to see immediate crippling punishments, before St. Patrick's Day, but this is going to be something that's going to be hanging over that program for quite a while. And, you've sort of seen Jim Harbaugh already kind of maybe having a wandering eye towards the NFL yet again.
Well, and if he is back next year, I won't be surprised if he misses the first 3 games next year as well, just like he did this year, because there is still, they had sort of agreed to a 4-game suspension. Then the NCAA backed away from that to start the season because they want, I think they thought there was more meat on that suspension bone. So they still want more from Jim Harbaugh, and I think they plan to get it. It's just a matter of, will everything be resolved in time, or will Michigan do what they did last time and self-impose? Maybe they will self-impose another 3-game suspension for Jim Harbaugh based on the findings and their thoughts. But, this may also be a moot thought exercise based on the off season that Jim Harbaugh has every year in terms of, as you said, looking to the NFL. So we'll see what happens there. We talk about it every year, and every year he shows back up at Michigan. I don't think he's ever had anything like this hanging over him, though. So maybe more than ever, there is incentive for him to finally leave.
Yeah, we'll see. This is, and Jim Harbaugh, the self-imposed 3-game suspension this year covered 3 games against who? East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green, I think. The second team on Michigan's schedule for next year is Texas Longhorns, coming to Ann Arbor, week number 2. So that would be a more substantial game to self-impose something for, so they may just try and ride it out. But we'll see, and maybe he's coaching the San Diego Chargers, and it's not his problem, or largely not his problem. But we'll continue to follow this story. Just thought this was worth a quick update, just to sort of separate the fact from the fiction, and that, hey, this is, the hammer is going to fall and he's not going to be able to coach the Rose Bowl. No, that's not at all what we're talking about here. And no, this does not involve any of the Conor Stalions stuff. That is all still to come. But we'll just wanted to give you an update on all this stuff. And Michigan, of course, playing Alabama in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day in one of the college football playoff semifinals. That'll be a game rich with narrative, I suspect. And then depending on how that goes, it's either going to be a great start to the 2024 year for Michigan, or a very, very rough start with more choppy seas potentially ahead. So we will keep following this story. We'll keep following the Buckeyes, as they are now 1 week away from the Cotton Bowl game against Missouri. Early signing day now in the rearview mirror. Could be another addition or two to the 2024 recruiting class for the Buckeyes. And of course, looking at the transfer portal as well. You can follow all of that stuff with us at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Subscribe at BuckeyeHuddle.com to get access to our Insider Board, the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, our fantastic team of insiders covering the team and recruiting and X's and O's and much, much more. And of course, our YouTube channel, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Make sure you're subscribed there as well. Hit that bell. We're going to have lots of content coming to you down in Dallas in the coming days. Kevin, Tony, and I will be down there covering the game. Should be lots of interesting stuff to talk about, and much, much more, all at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.